What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bound to Improve. My name is Lennon Eller.
And I'm Chris Pound. And after a good couple weeks, month and a half, we're finally back. And it was much needed time off, I'll say. You know, school was getting kind of heavy.
Holidays.
This semester is heavy, but we're excited to continue this journey, and we hope that you follow along with us.
Yep. So before we cut it off for a little bit, the last book we read was As Many Reps as Possible. And before we get into this week's, we'll do a little our implementations from last time. So we read As Many Reps as Possible by Jason Kalipa, and mine was to compartmentalize my spring semester in terms of dedicating a certain amount of time to focus on a certain subject and giving 100% of that and not focusing on anything else. And I showed Chris kind of my breakout before we got started here.
Yeah, for me, mine was to put time frames on things. And I guess one of the things I did do was I started to do these timed workouts, and Landon has done the same thing. And, you know, a lot of the times I feel like I go to the gym and I'm there for an hour and a half, and I just don't feel very accomplished, if that makes sense. Like, yes, I went in, I did what I wanted to do, but how did it make me feel afterwards? Well, I felt like there was a lot of leisure time in those type of workouts, and by timing myself, I was able to continue to keep the intensity higher than I would have been able to if I was just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what life is really about, is a lot of times we get stuck in just going through the motions. Are we surviving or are we thriving? And a lot of times I feel like a lot of people are just trying to survive, trying to keep their head above water. And so now I'm trying to implement things that I can do to thrive in my situations and help other people thrive in their situations, which is a lot about what this next book is.
Yeah, so the book we read was Multipliers by Wiseman. And sort of a brief overview of the book. It breaks it out into multipliers and diminishers, and then it kind of goes into the 5 fundamentals of the multiplier framework, and then the last couple chapters are how to not be a diminisher.
Yeah. So what is a diminisher and what is a multiplier? A multiplier is people who saw, used, and grew the intelligence of others. You're trying to maximize the potential of the people that you're constantly around, whether that be your friends, your people you work with, or your family. And then opposite of that is a diminisher, and they pretty much just shut down the intelligence of others. And it's not a good thing to be a diminisher, I'd say.
Yeah, it's like one brain and many hands.
Yeah.
So there's one guy at top using all the brain power, and then uses the hands of the people below him to do all the dirty work, I guess.
It's not a good system to follow.
Yeah, as we'll get into.
Yeah.
And this, you're not either one thing or another. You kind of lie along a spectrum, but just wanted to emphasize that before we move on here.
Alrighty, what is the multiplier effect in your eyes?
So it's just extracting all the possible capabilities from the people that you currently have.
Yeah.
So instead of going to just adding headcount to your department, to your team, what can you do to get the most out of the team you have? Like, it's like making more of more.
Are you using your resources efficiently and effectively? And in most cases, the answer is honestly no. So in this book, it really talks about getting the most out of what you can do with getting the most out of the people you have available to you and the resources that you have available to you.
Yeah, and the studies show like you get 2 times work more from people than diminishers, like when you have multipliers on your team. And this is about stretching people's capabilities beyond that 100%. So how can they give 110, 120?
Yeah, and there are a couple really key traits that multipliers have. One of them being the hard edge, right? See a lot, expect a lot, right? If I'm putting all my effort in, I want my team to put all their effort in, and kind of vice versa in that scenario.
Yeah. Next is don't play small. Ability to take people and raise them up, kind of like they mentioned Magic Johnson in the book. Like in high school, he could score all the points. But then he saw parents leaving the game because they came to watch their kids and they weren't doing anything. So he was like, how can I make everybody else
better
on the team better?
Yeah. And lastly, a sense of humor. People love to be around other people who are charismatic, right? They like being able to be loose and kind of free thinking, think for themselves. And with a multiplier, that really gives other people to think freely for themselves, which overall adds to the benefit that they're providing for the team.
Yeah. So now moving into the main framework, that's characterized by 5 key traits.
Yeah.
I'll call them. The first one is a talent magnet. You have to know how to attract the right talent. And we mentioned this in a prior episode. Shackleton was going on a trip to explore Antarctica, and in the newspaper he put hard journey, low wages,
may not make it back,
but he was attracting the people that was right for his team.
Because he also said that if they do make it back, they'll have fame and success, and he was looking for people who would rather die than not succeed.
Yeah. And a key principle of the talent magnet is kind of the cycle of attraction. So if you can, it begins with a leader possessing the confidence to bring in those A players on their team, or how can you make the players on your team into A players? Once you have those A players, how can you as a leader nourish them to get them to be A plus players?
Yeah.
Once they become A plus, then they're going to start getting more opportunities and like offers, and they will eventually move on, which is important to kind of let them go. But you'll be known as a place who creates A plus players, so you'll attract more A talent, and the cycle repeats itself.
Yeah, you may lose A plus players along the way, but at the same time, you'll also be attracting these top tier talented people who want to work with someone who is all about increasing the potential and the people around them.
Yeah, so now going on to the 4 practices of talent magnets. You gotta look for talent everywhere. This is more than IQ, as we talked about in other episodes. Like there's only a certain IQ that kind of matters. It's all soft skills.
Chris Langsom, in Outliers.
Yep.
He had like the highest IQ ever recorded, but yet he was a janitor at a high school, and solely because he didn't fit into the system that people were trying to throw him into.
Yeah.
And nobody recognized that you can be much more than what your quote unquote IQ says about you.
Yeah.
Who are you as a person? What makes you tick? And who can get the most out of you, and different, whether it's adversity or times of good peace, I would say. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to talk about IQ because everybody's different, and it's like, are you smart or are you capable? I feel like everybody is capable of being smart, but not everybody is smart, and I think it's a lack of trying their hardest to succeed in what they want to succeed in.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I've thought a lot about, everybody has the capability of doing the things that they want to do. They just almost get discouraged in the process because they are not seeing the progress that they wish they were seeing.
And I think this kind of leads into the second practice here of kind of finding people's native genius.
Yeah.
How can you extract what people do exceptionally well and kind of make them like even better at that? So kind of ask them what makes that person smart. And once you see that, like call them out in a positive way for it so they're aware of it.
Yeah. I guess people don't even realize that some of the things that they're good at until someone labels that quote unquote genius aspect of their life.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
This goes on to the third one. Utilize people at their fullest. Kind of touches on the last one. Just praise them, specifically call them out when they're doing good things.
And then lastly, you got to remove the blockers. The biggest mistake is waiting too long to remove these quote unquote blockers. Almost like a diminisher, right? Because when someone is taking away from the overall progress of a team, it's going to affect everybody within that team, whether that be trying to complete the task or just their own kind of genius within the team structure. I think it's a lot about structure and how people can play off of each other's geniuses that ultimately create this creativity outburst, and that's where some of the best ideas that we've had come out to play.
Yeah, and you usually know that in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So like as soon as you know that, get rid of those people that are kind of
holding other people back.
Yeah. So how can you put this into practice? Name people's geniuses.
Yeah.
Like ask, in what way is this person smart? Next would be supersize what makes them smart. Like putting them in a position that's almost too big for them. Letting them have room to stretch and grow.
Yeah.
And then lastly would be to let go of your superstars, and that plays back into the cycle of attraction. Let go of the A+ players that you develop and bring in new players.
Yeah, because if you never let go of your A+ players, you're never gonna truly be able to maximize their own potential.
Yeah.
And it could ultimately come back to help you by letting the A+ players go. Because and I guess thinking about it, 5 years ago, where were you compared to today? Right, you're drastically different from where you were, and you can't even think about where you'll be in the next 5 years because that is so far beyond your mind's capability of understanding, which you got to live in the moment for, which is another book we'll talk about in the future.
Yeah. So that is the talent magnet attribute. Moving on to the second one here is liberator, and the main thing here is to just give permission and space to think.
Think freely. Think on their own. Let people come up with their own decisions and their own solutions to situations.
Yeah, and this comes with a duality of comfort and pressure. You got to give them the space, but like the promise back to you has to be that they're giving you the best work. And like I give you the permission to make mistakes, but you have to make sure you learn from them and never make those again.
Yeah, the 3 practice of liberator is create space, release others by restraining yourself. It's more important to listen than to talk, and because you'll really learn who someone is by listening to what drives them rather than just doing all the talking, and that's important too. And later on in this book, it talks about the investor type of thing, where you're there, if that makes sense, but you're still allowing people to freely think for themselves.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Something I would add on to that is, as I've seen like in the professional workforce, the younger people usually do not have a say or do not have the confidence to kind of speak up in a larger group. So as that senior leader, try to kind of do a reverse order, like ask the younger people their opinions first, so they don't have to come up with any like bias based on what the senior leaders are saying. So give everybody an equal say to get everything out on the table. And the last practice here would be to generate rapid learning cycles. Allow people to make those mistakes and find the best way to go forward and not make those mistakes again.
Yeah, along with the liberator, you kind of have to label your options. You have soft options and you have hard options. Soft options, you have a perspective to offer and ideas for someone else to consider. With hard options, you have a clear and potential idea of what's going on.
You just have to know when you're able to give your people under you room to space to think, and create, and know when to kind of step in and
take
and
the charge.
Be firm in your
take the lead on things.
Yeah.
But that I would say that's one of the hardest things to do is understanding, okay, is my input needed right now, or should I let people kind of come up with their own ideas before I step in?
Yeah.
And I think that's a trial and error type of thing. You won't know what your team is really capable of until you throw a question at them and
let them see what they do.
See what they can come up with on their own.
Yeah, and as a leader, you have to talk up your own mistakes.
Yeah.
Publicly in meetings, not just on one-on-ones. Explain how you failed, what you could do better.
Yeah, everybody has failed, but it's not the fact that you failed. It's about what you've learned from that failure that's more important than anything else.
Yeah, and with your team, giving them space, they use the analogy like a ship's water line. So define that water line where the water's brushing up against the side of the boat, because if you put a hole in something that's above the water line, yeah, it stinks that you got a hole in the side of your boat, but it's not gonna cause any
the boat.
Yeah, but if you hit something under the water line, then it's obviously
Gonna sink
sink the boat and cause a lot of problems with it. So kind of define that problem and then give them that space to do their thing.
Yeah, the third aspect of a multiplier is the challenger. And there are really 3 practices of a challenger. The first being seed the opportunity. Help people discover opportunity and then challenge themselves.
Yeah, so to do this, you have to let them kind of figure out the core problem.
Yeah.
So this is where they talk about taking them to Gemba, which is taking them to the root of the problem, letting them see the problem yourself, because you, as a leader, you can easily kind of say, this is what's going wrong, do this to fix it. But if you take them, let them see the problem,
it may alternatively go in a completely different direction that you had thought it was going to go in, and that could end up being the better opportunity than what you had originally thought. You got to let people come up with their own ideas and their own solutions to problems.
Yeah, kind of like create that skeleton,
yeah,
and let them fill in all the missing pieces.
Yeah, number 2 is lay down a challenge. Ask the hard questions to make people think and rethink.
Yeah, so people feel motivated when there's something to chase.
Yeah.
So give them something that's quote mission impossible.
Yeah.
So they have something that they can go and work towards every day that seems really far off, and maybe they might not reach it, but if they do, like, that's a huge success, not only your team, but ultimately probably the business that is behind you as well.
And lastly, generate belief.
So kind of touches on from the last one. You are able to see things from a 30,000 foot level, like as a senior leader.
Yeah.
But you have to go down to the 1,000 foot level to see if it appears possible. You can't create too big of a mission impossible that people are like, there's no way we're ever going to achieve that.
Because that discourages people. If you give them too big of a challenge and aren't willing to kind of get into the trenches with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and another thing with this is you got to begin with small early wins. Be able to kind of let them see and be able to pick that low-hanging fruit that ultimately keeps them motivated. Because if the fruit's at the top of the tree, they're like, man, there's no way we're ever going to get it. But if you start with one at the bottom and slowly work your way up, they're going to be able to see their progress.
Yeah, the little wins matter.
Yeah.
And they compound over time, and that's important in the overall progression of someone's personal life, professional life, and pretty much every aspect of life. You know, don't take for granted the little wins that we're given every day, right? It was a blessing to wake up in the morning, because there are people who can't even get out of bed, right? So never take what you have for granted, because there are people in this world who don't have what you have.
Mm-hmm. Next attribute would be the debate maker. Kind of operate on the assumption that with good enough minds, you will be able to figure it out as a team. So 3 practices of a debate maker. 1 is be able to frame the issues. The key parts of a debate are formulated before the debate begins. So you have to think of all these attributes beforehand. What is the decision be made? What are we choosing between? Why is this question important to answer? Who will make the final decision and who will deliver the input? Is it going to be a meritocracy? If just one person own the final vote? And then how will it be made? Which is like the majority consensus is one person after hearing all the input. And the key thing here would be to debate a question, not a topic, because you're not going to get anywhere with debating a topic.
Moving on here, you have to spark the debate. There are 4 elements that make a great debate. Engaging. Question is compelling and important to everybody who is attending.
Next is comprehensive. The right information has to be shared to generate a holistic and collective understanding of the issues.
It needs to be fact-based more than opinion-based.
And then educational, it has to be based more on what people learn based on who wins or who loses.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a yin and a yang to debate. You have to create safety while also demanding rigor. So ways you can create that safety, or as a leader, share your views last, give those younger, more junior persons the first say. Once people kind of determine their first view, make them switch sides. This will kind of remove that who wins and who loses aspect, and you're going to be able to kind of root out what is the true best decision.
But it's also important to focus on the facts rather than opinions, because sometimes opinions get portrayed as facts when there is no factual evidence behind their opinions.
Yeah, and then the demand rigor side is ask those hard questions and challenge the underlying assumptions by making sure that the evidence is in the data.
Yeah, ask why repeatedly until the root cause is unearthed. You never truly know what the issue is until you repeatedly ask, why is this going on? Why is this not happening? Why can we not find the solution to this question?
Yeah, and the last one here is just drives down decisions, which will be completed by kind of following those items that we listed above.
Yeah. Investor?
Yeah, we can move on to investor here. Always invest in the success of others. You can jump in and teach and share ideas, but always return to shifting the root of accountability. So the 3 practices of the investor: define ownership, give people 51% of the vote and full ownership to create certainty and build confidence. When you put the onus of responsibility for the project on people, then it's going to make them care about that more, and they're going to deliver their best work. Because if, say, I'm responsible for the project, but Chris, you're working on it, I mean, yeah, you'll do the work, but do you really?
It's not mine.
It's not yours. No. Yeah.
And so I've got no reason to fully jump into this problem if I don't feel like I'm being appreciated to an extent. But I think more importantly here is building the confidence of others, right? Nobody likes to fail, but the people who are confident in their abilities, you're going to be able to get more out of them than the people who have failed in the past and simply cannot get over that failure. You have to be able to move on from what has happened in the past, focus on what is right now, in order to achieve what you want to in the future.
Yeah. And then lastly, with that defining ownership, is put them in that stretch position again. Allow them room to take on a bigger project, and that's honestly how you grow the most. Next, you have to have investing resources. You have to be able to teach them, but do not always be the fallback plan. So have someone like another employee, or try not to make it a manager that they can fall back on. Try to help them, put them in an environment that they can figure it out.
Along with that, we have to keep people accountable. The ability to balance taking hold of the pen, offering feedback, and then giving the pen back. Let people come up with their own solutions to the problem rather than you being the solution to the problem.
Yeah, and with that, another thing that I've learned personally from the professional aspect is kind of like this story that Liz shared. She had an internship where she made a whole bunch of edits to someone who wrote different things. So one time she was kind of struggling with the wording. She didn't really know how to frame it. So she just wrote AWK, which kind of stand for awkward text, and kind of sent it back to him. And he came back to her desk and said, never present me in AWK without a FIX.
Fix.
Yeah. So what that kind of means, and what I've learned, is always come to the table with a recommendation and have some backup behind it. So if you see the problem and you're presenting that to the manager, don't ask them for their top solutions. Present them with your best recommendation with some evidence behind that, because that's ultimately what they want to see.
Yeah.
So that wraps up the 5 main attributes of the multiplier framework. And the last 3 chapters kind of hit on a couple of different subjects here. So the first is accidental diminishers. You may not realize it, but you may have tendencies that are actually part of the diminisher mindset and framework, despite having the best intentions. So you just have to be constantly seeking feedback from your team members, asking what you can be doing better. What signs have I been showing that is more diminishing?
Yeah, and sometimes the feedback isn't going to be the best. But I think it's important to realize that if you're getting bad feedback in the first place, that just tells you that you have a strong relationship with your team and that they want to see you improve as much as you want to see them improve.
Yeah. And with that accidental diminisher, it's always about doing less and challenging those people more. So how can, within your organizations, within your teams, how can you challenge or deal with diminishers?
And the question that we had is, can people change, or is that something that you have to you can't force someone else to change? They have to come to the realization that they need to make a change on their own, which alternatively you kind of have to multiply yourself.
Be the change yourself. Take on these tendencies, and how can you create a multiplying effect within your team that influences the rest of your team, and hopefully that upper manager who's really a diminisher. So becoming a multiplier, the key things to kind of do is adopt the 5 assumptions that we were talking about throughout the episode.
Talent magnet, liberator, challenger, debate maker, and investor.
Yeah. And then work the extremes. You don't have to be perfect in everything. You just have to be able to minimize your weaknesses and be really good in 1 or 2 specific areas, is what was talked about in the book. The next is run experiments. It usually takes about 60 days to learn a new habit or induct a new habit. So do something for 30 days, and then this gives you time to reflect. So if you, for example, take on the only asking the questions aspect, try that in every single one of your meetings is only respond with questions. Try for 30 days, reflect on it, and see if it's something that you should implement moving forward. Or maybe not 100% questions, but a certain...
It's better to ask questions than to give the answers.
Yeah, and then she provides a lot of good experiments that in the book that we won't touch on. Yeah. And then brace yourself for setbacks. They happen, and always have that accountability partner to see if that's just going to keep you motivated. They're going to be able to point out, hey, you're slacking. That's kind of a diminisher tendency that you did in that meeting yesterday. Or talking about how you can implement some of these practices as a multiplier.
Ready for implementations?
Yeah, we can do implementations. So I want to see if I'm going to be able to, with work, class, projects, see if I can find people's native geniuses by asking in which way, or how is this person smart, and how can I extract that?
For me, I'm going to try to push my friends to the next level, whether that be a fitness goal, a life goal, or just relationship aspect of life. I want to try and really help people maximize the potential that they have, because I think everybody has the potential to be great. And like I said, everybody has the capability of becoming great. It's just, do they have the people in their lives to make them accountable for the actions that they've been doing? And you almost have to kind of help someone see their own vision to an extent, I think.
And I think it would be really cool if you could try to plug in some of these multiplier practices.
For sure.
And then now moving on to the favorite quotes. I have a few of them. Again, first one is, how smart you are is defined by how clearly you can see the intellect of others. And the next is, the number one difference between a Nobel Prize winner and others is not IQ or work ethic, but that they ask bigger questions. That one was by Peter Drucker.
One of mine here is, success requires intense concentration and keen mental aptitude. You got to be willing to put in the work and the time and the effort in order to succeed.
Awesome. Anything else to add for multipliers?
I think that's pretty much all I have.
Sweet. The next book we will read is the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. And it is another thick one like the 48 Laws of Power, so we will be splitting that into 2 episodes. But we just wanted to thank you guys all for tuning in.
Yep, and we will see you next week.
Make sure
to, it's been so long since I've done this, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, bound to improve. See you next week.